There's been a lot of activity going on, and I have two incredible panelists. For those of you that don't know, my name is Jennifer Bushman, and I have been a sustainable aquaculture strategist and water farmer champion at all levels for over a decade. I'm also joined by Crystal Johnson. She is with Hatch Aquaculture Accelerator, and Hatch is actually a global aquaculture accelerator dedicated to making fully sustainable aquaculture available worldwide and a reality. And Margaret Henderson, who I really do consider such an important champion for us, she's owner president of Henderson Strategies and the campaign manager for Stronger America Through Seafood. Yes, and this is a lobbying group that's dedicated to increasing Americans' access to healthy, sustainable, affordable seafood, making that simple. And the US must produce more of its own seafood. So for those of you that don't know, over 85%, depending on what you're reading, of fish and seafood is imported into the United States. And we really need more local fish and seafood, both on the aquaculture side, as well as these fisheries that can strengthen American jobs, give us more food security, bring more innovative technology, and of course, a sustainable source of healthy protein. So Margaret, it's been a big week, and the last couple of weeks have been incredible. And I wanted to first and foremost start with you and talk about what has been going on. First and foremost, we'd love everyone to hear about your journey into fish and seafood, and then share with us the Stronger America Through Seafood effort. So just describe high level to bring us into what's been going on, of course, with this executive order and the bill proposal that's coming up.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I do not claim to be proficient in Facebook Live and or Zoom, despite all, appearances otherwise. This is a new platform for me, but thank you very much. And, what time is it? It's 5:03. I'll try to keep it maybe 5 minutes.
Whichever way, higher level. We've got lots to get into. So,
okay. So yeah, I just, full disclosure, I'm a federal lobbyist. I've represented the seafood community generally for 15 years now. I started in 2005 as a lobbyist. Prior to that, I was working on Capitol Hill as a congressional staffer. And I've represented a lot of different aspects of the community over the years. Clearly, aquaculture has always been a part of the dialogue. I've been on the phone actually quite a lot this week with some of the original folks who have been pioneering federal advocacy in this space. I first started talking about offshore aquaculture on the Hill in, I'd say, 2006. There was a bill for offshore aquaculture introduced in the US Senate back in 2005. So this is not a new discussion, and it's been in the fish world and the fish policy world, a recognition that we should expand US seafood production through aquaculture is not a new concept. And there's been a lot of people in this space for a long time. But in 2017, when it was shortly after the current administration took over, there began kind of a renewed discussion about the offshore component of aquaculture. Those previous bills did not pass. There was no significant executive action taken. And then that sort of was put to the side for a little bit of time. Back in 2017, there was a lot of chatter, I guess, within the policy community in DC. There's a renewed interest, there's a renewed appetite. Meanwhile, the industry itself had come light years in terms of the technology, everything from feed efficiency to the remote sensing technology that occurs in the offshore space. At the same time, we since as a country have begun importing exponentially more and more seafood, which is not a challenge in and of itself, but it exposed a bit of an opportunity. Why isn't the US doing more of its own production? I think, we're the greatest country on earth. My position, not Satz's position, but we could do better. And fortunately, I had been doing some work for different organizations in the fish community And in 2017, it was actually at the invitation of Cargill, a company that now sits on the board of Stronger America Through Seafood. They called together a group of leaders from across the seafood supply chain to their K Street offices in DC and said, we get the sense something is going to happen on aquaculture.
Mm-hmm.
We would like to form a group, if that's what the group wants, get our collective resources together and help make this happen and help lead this discussion and educate policymakers about this missed opportunity and the realities of what aquaculture could do for this country. And it was in November of 2017, that core group, which included a lot of the people who are now on the board of Stronger America Through Seafood. So it was Pacific Seafoods, Taylor Shellfish, Fortune Fish, Cisco, Red Lobster, some of the feed manufacturers. All those guys and gals were present, and we met with the Secretary of Commerce. That afternoon, we met with U.S. Senator Roger Wicker and several other staff and representatives, and they all kind of affirmed this hunch that something, there's an increased interest in this issue. Mm-hmm. So that group that day came together and formed what is now Stronger America Through Seafood. And the vision of this group is very laser focused on increasing U.S. consumption and U.S. availability of affordable, sustainable, and affordable, sustainable, healthful seafood. Mm-hmm. And to your point, we have had not just SATS, but the aquaculture community generally has had some real traction in the past, not only 2.5 years, but very significantly in the past month. And it's not necessarily something that we claim. You know, you say success has many fathers, right? Right. We don't claim full ownership of these recent exciting events, but we certainly have been engaged and are really pleased to help represent the broader industry at this time. So
absolutely.
In a nutshell, I think more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. And I think that, you know, one of the things that I wanted to do was that the executive directive that was put in place last week opens up by saying, I mean, essentially what you've said, America needs a vibrant and competitive seafood industry to create and sustain American jobs, put safe and healthy food on American tables, and contribute to the American economy. Despite America's bountiful aquatic resources, by weight, our nation imports over 85% of the seafood consumed in the United States. At the same time, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing undermines the sustainability of American and global seafood stocks, negatively affects general ecosystems and health, and unfairly competes with the products of law-abiding fishermen and seafood industries around the world. More effective permitting related to offshore aquaculture and additional streamlining of fishery regulations have the potential to revolutionize the American seafood production, enhance rural prosperity, and improve the quality of American lives. So Crystal, you live in Hawaii. It's a state that's known for incredible, well, there's a heritage, obviously, of fish and seafood in that state. We also know that fishery management and cooperation of the development of aquaculture has been a bit more advanced than a lot of other states. I mean, I live in California where, you know, the stop is, you know, regenerative aquaculture. We've got oysters, we've got seaweed, but Margaret and I can tell you that Chrissy Walton was working with Hub SeaWorld on a project and spent millions of dollars just to see if she could get the permit to be able to put a sustainable project in the water. She said she was going to put more money in it than she thought really she should. That was smart sense, because she wanted just to see if somehow they could work their way into permits. So this, in essence, in a lot of ways is what Margaret and the team has been trying to do, is figure out what that process is. So talk to us a little bit about why this has worked in Hawaii and what Hatch Blue certainly is doing to be able to support this worldwide, that are things that we should be looking at, you know, in the United States as we're navigating this new opportunity.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So, to start, a bill like the AQUA Act is necessary, not just for Hawaii, but for the entire US, because the executive order isn't going to be enough for the long run. What's good about the executive order that was put out on May 7th is that it establishes one agency, in this case it's NOAA, to review and authorize all offshore aquaculture. As you said, Jen, it'll provide more efficient and predictable aquaculture permitting, predictable regulatory framework, and the national standards for aquaculture production, which are critical to investing. Anybody who wants to invest right now in offshore farming is up against really expensive and uncertain processes, as you mentioned. So this is why we have investors and farmers doing business overseas. Not ideal and not what we want. In the meantime, this executive order is getting the agencies to lay the groundwork for permitting. So a bill like the AQUA Act is necessary to get Congress to create new federal law. As far as Hawaii and how we've made it work over here and how it's been effective, the state has been, I believe they've done a good job in supporting aquaculture in general. They've supported it, the innovation in this sector, and to help find ways to wean ourselves off of tourism and to address food security. So the state knows we need these things. And another point to that is our wild stocks here in Hawaii and throughout the US. But here in Hawaii, when people come here on vacation, they want to eat locally caught fish. And what a lot of people might not know is that over 60% of all the seafood in Hawaii that you eat here, it's imported. So, that mahi dinner or the sashimi that you ordered at your hotel or restaurant, it's not even from Hawaii. There's just not enough wild caught seafood to sustain us, no matter how well our fisheries are managed. And we do a great job of managing our fisheries. So I believe to that point, our local government realizes this and really wants to support aquaculture that's sustainable. I personally was born and raised here, and I want to see aquaculture grow, using smart laws that protect our natural resources. I believe, we all believe at Hatch and myself, when aquaculture is done right and we grow the right species in the proper ways, we have an incredible opportunity here in Hawaii and the rest of the US to change the food narrative, the food security narrative and sustainability.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that I've said as well is that, when was the last time you sat in a restaurant and asked if your ribeye was wild shot? Right? It's this consumptive entitlement of ocean resources. And it also was a situation, and I think we all can appreciate this, where early aquaculture did not have the technologies, did not have the advancements, just as we had poor farming techniques. Omar Alfie, I know from Pacifico Aquaculture, is on your board, and he has a great quote that is, just like we can farm chicken well, we can farm chicken badly. And it's very important, I think, that everyone understands that this is not, regardless of what administration this came down with in terms of this executive order, this was something that, Margaret, you and this group have been working on. Blue Ocean Mariculture, Todd Madsen in Hawaii, who's sustainably raising kampachi. These are best-in-class farms that are considered worldwide as examples of how to farm, have been a part of this group. So one of the things that I want to ask you is, can you give everyone some detail about how this order specifically streamlines aquaculture permitting and why it's necessary? Because I don't think that everyone—
me or—
Yes, to you, is because NOAA is designated in the bill, obviously, specifically so that all routes flow through NOAA. So I wondered if you could explain that a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you. So since our organization, Stronger America Through Seafood, came together, we had a big vision, right? We need to increase sustainable U.S. seafood production. The opportunity, obviously, is through aquaculture. Again, recognizing we need all kinds. We need both commercially caught and farm-raised seafood to achieve that objective. The most prominent barrier to that vision was this regulatory morass of permitting, which you alluded to with somebody just investing money just to see if they could get a permit. It's not possible. We now have, I think there is one federally permitted open ocean facility for growing fish in the entire United States EEZ, which is the second largest in the world. This is a massive amount of space to grow food, and we're completely avoiding it in terms of an opportunity. In order to overcome that barrier, that regulatory challenge, and begin to leverage our ability to produce our own food, we need two things. We need literally an act of Congress, which is what Crystal was just talking about, this, what is now called the AQUAA Act. And you need that act of Congress in order to establish NOAA's authority to give permits at all. Right now, there's no federal authority for NOAA to permit offshore aquaculture, and that's something that is needed. Number two is some sort of executive recognition and framework and groundwork to enable that AQUAA Act, once it is passed, to go through a rulemaking process, and then subsequently the regulations will come through. So it's a two-part process. So we've always recognized we need two things. We need executive action, we need that leadership from the federal level within the agency structure, and then we need the act of Congress. So with May 7th executive order, I feel like we just knocked down a massive barrier to increasing U.S. seafood production. But the reality is, it's not, that in itself isn't the answer. We still have to have statutory authority to issue those permits. Mm-hmm. But I think what it does do, and it's only the entire EO, I think it's 7 pages, and only a couple of those pages are dedicated to aquaculture. And I've gotten a lot of questions from people, or there's been sort of criticisms of the whole thing, saying, well, it leaves too much open-ended. It doesn't include enough guardrails for environmental protection and all these kinds of things. And that's just a lack of understanding of the process. That's not the intent. The intent of an executive order is to establish a priority and to say, this has to be done. Agencies involved, NOAA, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Environmental Protection Agency, all of the different agencies involved in open ocean management, you guys get ready, start preparing under the current statutes for what it will take to implement something once it becomes available. So there's not even an intention to begin permitting under the executive order. So that's a bit of a misunderstanding, I think, that, oh, well, is there going to be this rush to permit? No, I don't believe that's the intent. It's to lay the foundation for passage of federal legislation.
And that's exactly, I think, the misunderstanding is why the difference between the executive order and what work still has to be done on the bill. So can you explain maybe that in a little bit more detail? Because any president coming in could stop that executive order, right? There's some insecurity about the fact that the executive order could be pulled back, correct?
Right. Technically, that's true. And I actually, somebody said the other day, oh, presidents are just passing executive orders willy-nilly. This is a new way to do business. That's actually not true. There's been a significant decline historically in the issuance of executive orders. FDR passed over 1,000 executive orders, I believe. There were many, many more presidents passing many more than what's used today. But you're right in that it does not hold the force of law. Mm-hmm. Technically, it could be overturned or overruled or reduced in priority with a future administration, but it's not that easy. It's not something that's just routinely done. A new administration comes in and all the prior work is just thrown out the window. Mm-hmm. There will be a lot of work done from the agency level that I think will be of benefit, and it will be long lasting.
Mm-hmm. So let's just talk about really quickly some of those concerns, because people have had a tough time with aquaculture, and we know that. And aquaculture has had bad practices. They're just like in anything. There are good players and there are bad players. And so working together in tandem, I think, is going to be very important. And I'm under the impression that most of those regulations around sustainable aquaculture and the environmental components exist within NOAA from a regulatory perspective already?
Yes. Oh my gosh, Jennifer, thank you for clarifying. That's one of the biggest challenges of perception with this legal process, this legislative process, is that somehow we are seeking through this, and I think it's a misnomer to say streamlining. Sometimes that's not what we're seeking to do. We as an industry group, and I think everybody involved, wants very much to preserve existing statute as it relates to fisheries management or marine mammals or EPA clean water regs. All of those existing statutes will remain completely intact. Really what we're seeking to achieve is a pathway through all of those in a way that recognizes them and ensures that they're enforced, but also allows a business to move through. And so I don't know if this is, I throw these things out there and this is just my own kind of idea, but I sort of see it as establishing almost like a small business administration for aquaculture. So it is an agency of the federal government saying, instead of, which has so often been the stance in this debate, that government needs to be prohibitive towards industry, where we flip that on its head and we say, no, government needs to help facilitate and make available this opportunity to the Americans and the organizations who want to do it. So how do we pave a path through the regulations, abide those regulations, but make it clear for industry so they can do right by those regulations, but also do some business at the same time to the benefit of us all.
And those regulations, I mean, to be fair, NOAA has been a really, I don't want to say it's community-based, but they definitely reach out to the NGOs. They work in concert with the Marine Mammal Center. They work in concert with with Seafood Watch and others. And so they're not, in that way, I don't think they're a government agency that's looked at as kind of the bad side, right? I think they have been very open and really conciliatory in this process. And it is true that the process hasn't worked at times, but of course we know there's a lot of that in agencies and with government in general. So Crystal, I want to ask you, what role do you feel like Hatch Blue can play in this? I mean, I think that understanding that there's this greater industry opportunity and the role of support that you feel like a lot of these best-in-class farms and companies can make in the United States, because we are seeing such huge innovations in aquaculture. Maybe give us some examples of that.
Sure. So Hatch, simply put, we invest in aquaculture startups that are sustainable and scalable in nutrition, health, biotech, production, technology. These are the things that will improve sustainability over time in aquaculture. We have an $8 million investment fund and an accelerator program that we run each year that invests in about 8 to 12 companies. And we give each of them $130,000, and we take them to our 3 office locations in Hawaii, Norway, and Singapore to meet who they need to meet and help them in all fields of testing, product, business development, and marketing. We've made 30 investments in the last 2 years, making us the most active program by number of deals for this aquaculture sector. So I feel this is the best way that Hatch can contribute, is by putting money in startups that are going to help sustainable aquaculture.
Absolutely. And I do feel like there's also that, Margaret, you know this, the tech companies, large family foundations, Google, Oracle, and a number of others. So all of those, I think all of that collective, amazing brain power. I'm looking at these questions. I don't know if you're seeing me sort of move my eyes back and forth here, but looking at some of the questions that we're getting. And one of the questions that came through was, assuming the AQUA Act passes, what is going to be the biggest hurdle for companies to start offshore farms? And maybe, Margaret, that's one that you can take for us, since you're in that, and obviously investment's going to be one of them.
Right. I think that's going to be a hurdle, and clearly there's people on the business side who are far more qualified to answer that than I am. I don't want to be flip, but that would be a luxury problem, Jennifer. I am very much looking forward to the day when we pass the AQUAA Act and we have to ask ourselves, now what? And, you know, I'm just a pragmatist, and I'm, you know, the beauty of this coalition that we've built is our ability to be just laser focused on federal policy. And there's not many other groups, I'll say that. There's not many other groups who have that privilege right now and have that ability. And so I think, you know, we're having a moment in the United States right now in terms of federal aquaculture policy, fisheries policy generally, but aquaculture seriously. And I'm not kidding when I say, I mean, I've been on the phone nonstop. And people are excited. People are a little confused, you know, what does this mean? But they're also legitimately, there's a lot of energy. And like I said, I've only been in this space from a advocacy, federal advocacy perspective for 15 years. And there's a lot of people who've been doing it a lot longer than me. But in my experience and in the experience of those I'm speaking to, this is pretty big. And I very much want us collectively, those of us who appreciate the opportunities and the benefits of aquaculture, I very much want us to come together and leverage this moment to the greater good. I mean, I know that sounds kind of lofty and political, but you know, there's a bit of a tear in the matrix right now, and fish is getting top billing in a way that I've never experienced. And I'm really excited about getting the legislation passed and seeing what we can do.
Now, there's an interesting question that's come across. Bradford LaRiviere has asked from Scoot Science. He actually is talking about, do you think that in the US there's more pressure for these aquaculturists to be that much more sustainable? He specifically asked in the US to achieve and maintain GAP certification, BAP, ASC, than many of the other countries where aquaculture is already more established. And that question brings up something that I had wondered about, which is, you know, in speaking with Aquarium of the Pacific, that is a very big advocate of this program, you know, they've essentially said that if someone follows those NOAA standards, they will likely get BAP certification by following those standards, and also most likely hit almost all of the benchmarks on ASC. So talk about how, because in aquaculture, we follow all of this quite closely. That's been what has been advocating and pushed aquaculture into a more sustainable level, as we have seen over the last decade. What role do you see playing in that? And is that something, maybe Crystal, you can even jump in terms of importance, because we know that those farms that we've spoken about are also in those ranges in ASC and yellow rated by Seafood Watch.
Right. Margaret, are you going to answer?
Yeah, Margaret, please. Yeah, and what role do you see them playing, those NGOs, what role do you see them playing in this along with NOAA? Because it has to have come up already.
Oh, sure. And sorry, I thought you were directing that question to Crystal. So in terms of the certifying bodies, I think that's a big part of the discussion. I don't know that there's a technical role that will play in the legislation and or the executive order. I think those are guiding principles. And I do believe there's a significant interest on the part of the policymakers at the federal level to mining best practices. And there is a willingness to listen. I don't work for the federal government, but I work with them, and I recognize there is quite a willingness to understand what works best. But you know, those certification practices they're brilliant, but they're not all harmonized, right? It depends on what it is that you're certifying for. And they all kind of, you know, you could potentially cherry pick from all of them and create kind of a universal piece that could be reflected in statute. But I haven't seen in any of the draft legislation or any of the executive directives that we've looked at any specific reference to a certification. I do see, and what I think is really brilliant about the AQUAA Act, the one that I do anticipate will be reintroduced very soon, and what was introduced recently in the House side, is this idea behind national standards. So that's the beauty of federal statute. You don't get into the weeds of you need this many inspectors on this many days. It's aspirational, right? And the best federal policies, the best government in general is big picture. And, you know, the US Constitution, for example, you know, it doesn't get down into the weeds, but these national standards, and you guys could look up HR 6191, which is the House version, and then we will soon have a Senate version. It establishes 10 national standards. What will the United States offshore aquaculture industry strive to do? You know, we will preserve coastal communities and their economies. You know, we will harmonize with existing commercial fishing industry. You know, it's these and that's not a direct citation, please. You'll have to reference it specifically, but it's aspirational in that way. Then it will be, of course, this is where the executive branch comes in. It will be up to those regulations to interpret and apply the specificity. And whether those lean on various certification bodies is to be seen.
And I wonder, now that there is a bit of an open door, more of an open door for that, Crystal, what is your feeling about cooperation with state government then? Because it will have to be in cooperation with state government as NOAA works with these sort of, as you've said, these more streamlined permitting process, and the idea that now we've got the door open for this dialogue, then the state is going to come in, and we might even have others, Coast Guard with MOUs from the state that do inspections and others. So how does this, in your mind, work in tandem?
You know, I think if we have federal legislation in place, the states will be able to do a better job of carrying everything out. And there won't be so many unknowns for the investors, for the farms, for everybody. So I feel like I like the idea of if we could cherry pick, you know, from different certifications, and for it to be very specific, you know, from a commercial perspective, not just, you know, these lofty, you know, sort of ideas, but actually, you know, have mandates that are very specific and on a federal level, and then let the states be able to carry them out, and that would streamline everything.
Mm-hmm. And I don't disagree. And I think there's also, in a lot of the questions that are coming in, I want to tell everyone, I think both Crystal and Margaret would be happy to answer questions. I'll put them into an email. We'll get them posted up on the Hatch Blue page so that you can see them, or even try to get them answered in the stream. So don't worry about that, because we're kind of at the edge of the time that, Margaret, certainly for you, as you're pushing these things through, we know that you've squeezed us into this today. But I want to make sure that everyone understands, and we, you know, my side of it is bringing that water farmer to market, the place where science, environment, technology, and the right species has the chance to come to market and be successful. And so when your questions have come in about what will we do about putting the names of these farms on menu, about being able to make sure that we have a collective approach around the marketing of fish and seafood, groups like Seafood Nutrition Partnership are beginning to create those campaigns. So everyone should look for that. The other thing is, fish and seafood is going to be thought of as something that's nutritious and important in this post-COVID environment, sustainable, healthy foods that we're going to need in order to fight what's going on out in the world. And so believe me, in my wildest dreams, as Margaret says, you know, these things that we put out into the world, we want to see where you sit down and you see a menu that describes the water farmer in equal tandem with your beautiful tomato farmer that made up the dish, along with the green beans, and the provenance of this beautiful fish and seafood that tells the story, that gives the background, and that's done in an incredible way. Because the truth of the matter is, done poorly, aquaculture can damage sensitive ecosystems. It can disrupt communities. It can pose a threat to human health. But done well, it's something that can be contributive. It can be a force ecologically, environmentally, and a place for social good. So I think it's something where what we want to see is all of this effort over the course of the last couple of years. This is something with action and collaboration that we can all come together. And I think, Margaret, you've said this, Crystal, you've said this, we've got an incredible opportunity to bring action and collaboration together to make this a successful effort. What we don't want to have happen is have it stop at the door because you don't understand all of the layers. And what I'm hoping from both of you is that this is only the beginning of, you know, kind of a coffee conversation that we all have with different players so that everyone can understand what the rest of the world knows. You know, we have incredible work at the University of California, Santa Barbara, Haley Freilich, an unbelievable report that said, if we farm on water the size of Lake Michigan, we don't have to pull stocks from the ocean ever again. And 90% of our ocean is caught at capacity or above. So aquaculture is an incredible opportunity. And I think in the US, I want everybody to remember that your heritage oyster farmer like Taylor Shellfish that has been in business for 3 generations, that trout farmer that we so revere in the Midwest, it's the same farmer that's trying to do that great work on the water. So I want to thank both of you, Margaret, Crystal, for what I hope will only begin to be a conversation that you'll be in. Margaret, your championing and your voice has been incredible. Crystal, what you've been doing, what Hatch Blue is trying to do, bringing investment, making investors feel secure about being on this journey with us to bring sustainable, ethical aquaculture to the United States. So I thank you both very much for joining me. And I promise to everyone, we didn't get to a lot of questions today, but we will circle back with the 2 of you. And I hope you'll answer them so that we can post them.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Jennifer.
And thanks
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me, and have a wonderful day. Stay healthy and stay safe. Bye-bye.
You.
Thank you.